Hi and welcome to this week's episode of Split the E podcast. I'm your host Sean O'Grady. In this podcast we split the entertainment of Vancouver City by taking the artists out for a drink. This week's guest is Aidan Dooley. Aidan is an actor and wrote this play called True Tales of Ireland, Tom Crean Antarctic Explorer. Tom Crean was one of the first people to explore Antarctica with the aid of Captain Scott and on another journey with Ernest Shackleton. He's been there 3 times out of the 4 major journeys, and that is brought to light in Aidan's play. He was one of the first people to show this story of this unsung hero. I had such a great time doing this podcast, and I would like to thank Aidan and Harry for making this happen. And you're just going to really enjoy this podcast because it's a true story that needs to be heard. Cheers. Have a good one. Aidan.
Sean.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Lovely cheers.
I know, yeah. Thanks to the Smiths and the Ford. We're actually blessed to even have this. Like, it's so lucky to just be. This is like built for podcasts, I think.
I think it is, yeah. Or
Willie O'Donnell definitely had it in mind. Or maybe there was some God, anyways. We're here now. You're over and you're doing a show on the 29th.
I am.
Tom Crean.
Yep.
What does Tom Crean mean to you at this age now? Because you're doing the show 20 odd years.
Yeah. Well, Tom, the memory of Tom, for me, I think, well, I could talk forever about him, Sean, but he kind of represents to me all that's good in humanity, all that's good in people. And I liken him to a sort of for me, he's like a little angel.
Ooh.
That's my kind of perception of him. He's like a good, really positive angel that helps people when if they know the story and they find out the story, or they come to the show and hear the story. It's a bit like when you hear a really good motivational speaker, or someone who's climbed Everest and is blind, or has swam the Atlantic and they've only got one arm. You think, what am I complaining about?
Yes.
What am I whinging about? And when you hear the stories of these people and what they're capable of going through for the sake of life, and we're whinging about life. Oh, so Tom represents for me kind of like the positive things in life. That's what he represents.
When I got this opportunity and I started researching, the very first time, or the first thing I heard was coming from a family of 10, and I think he was in the middle, maybe.
He was around the middle, yeah.
And he was I just thought of Forrest Gump straight away. I don't know why, because of the whole just absolute martyrism and just the braveness and to continue on. Yeah. And just Forrest Gump when he's picking up Lieutenant Dane and he's just running. Yes. That's the image I got.
Well, Tom, the story is littered with feats of heroism, really, and feats of. There's 2 ways of thinking about Tom Crean and what he did, and a great sportsman. The psychology of sport now is if you just think of the simple thing. You focus on just the simple thing, the need or the aim. And I think Tom I don't think he necessarily understood the psychology of it, but what he had in spades was, I need to get to that place, and I will get to that place. And he didn't allow negativity to come into his mindset.
Yes.
Because I think if you do, a bit like Rory McIlroy.
Yeah.
You know what happened to him in the last 3 holes. You know what I mean? He allowed something into his brain that then took him somewhere and was destructive. Tom had the capacity to be very positive the entirety of when he had a serious job to do.
Because even of course, but when you even see pictures of him, I think he's the only one that's smiling in negative like 50 degrees or something. It's crazy.
He's always got a smile on his face. You read he never kept a diary, which is one of the reasons he was forgotten about for decades, as well as the politics of Ireland at the time when he came back after the War of Independence. As well. But he was you read the diaries about him, he was always messing.
Yes, yeah.
Which he'd always have a sort of like a comment to make, a joke to make. Like they hauled a fella out of a crevasse once, and he knew look, can you imagine now? This man he'd fallen down a crevasse. He was held by a rope to the next man, and he would have fallen down maybe 20 foot, and he was hanging there. And Tom pulls him back up, and your man's kind of shaking with fear, and Tom says to him, "That was your birthday present, Bill." You know what I mean? And I don't think Bill found it funny necessarily, but Tom found it funny.
Yeah.
So he always was quick with a quip, and that's what there's not much written about him, but what is written about him in the humdrum days, as in the days when they're doing nothing, was that he was always ready for a bit of a joke or a bit of a laugh.
No way. He was because he left home when he was like 15, right? But like that's just normal in Ireland.
It was.
Like, you're not going to have English or able to read. So he
did. No, believe it or not, he had a beautiful script. He did know how to read.
Did he? Yeah.
And he didn't know how to write. Yeah.
But he just didn't.
But he just didn't bother writing a diary.
Okay.
Just like, how many of us? I remember doing an interview with a guy years ago, and I said, "Tom never wrote a diary," and he said, "Aidan, who writes diaries?"
It's true, actually.
You kind of write a diary if you have a notion,
or if you're a captain.
But if you have a notion, Sean, that someone's going to read it.
Yeah.
And you feel a self-importance.
Yes.
That you're going to bestow your diary to some legacy of your. And I'm thinking, Tom didn't have an ounce of that in him.
He didn't have an ounce of ego then.
No. So he had no desire to waste his time. One of the first comments in the show actually is, I'm forgotten. I said, "Tom, forgotten because I didn't write a diary." And I look at the audience and says, "I had more things to do at minus 30 degrees than writing a blasted diary."
Yeah.
But these guys were scribbling diaries because they had notions about themselves, and Tom didn't.
They're going off on this adventure that no one's been before.
Yeah, it's like going to the moon in the day of. Yeah. It was like going to the moon, and there was no radio. There was no radio, so there was no way of connecting with them. So they left on this ship from Littleton in New Zealand. And no one would know there was a problem unless they didn't come back 2 years later.
And what I found as well is so off the chance, just life, look at the Irish or whatever. Tom only got on that boat because another guy, he was a captain
smacked, and then ran off into the back.
Was he only like 19 or 20?
No, he was older than that now, Sean. He was in his mid-20s, late 20s. So he had reached his fees. He'd reached his. Now he was only 5'11".
Oh,
but compared to the rest of them, he was a giant.
Yeah.
He was only 5'11". But I remember going. I'll tell you a story about him. When I first started doing the show, his 2 daughters were still alive.
Yeah.
And I came over to Tralee.
He had 3, right?
He had 3, and one of them died of an epileptic fit when she was 4. Died in his arms. And I remember, I often think, oh my God, he saved all those men.
Yeah.
There's his little, oh God, it was awful. And he wrote a beautiful thing on her grave, which you wouldn't necessarily get, even in Ireland. He said, from Mammy and Daddy, and so he wrote things like that, which you'd think the local priest now would have said, you can't put that on it. But even if the priest did say that, he wrote that on it, you know what I mean? But the 2 daughters, I'd done the show 2 or 3 times, and they'd come to see it. And I dress kind of in the style of the clothing of the Antarctic.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I'm coming over now to do a dinner, the first dinner for the newly formed Tom Crean Society, which was intent on getting the statue in Enniscorthy. That was their raison d'etre. And it was all built on Michael's book, and then my show was kind of creating the right momentum and all that. Anyway, the eldest daughter, Mary, said to me, I said, I'm going to come over. She said, will you do me a favour, Aidan? I said, what? Will you stop making my father look like a homeless man?
Oh my God.
So I went away and I thought, oh my God. Okay.
Did you change it?
No, for the dinner I did. What I did is I rang up a company that does costumes for films called Angels. They're called Angels, believe it or not. They were at the time. Angels and Burmans. And I rang them up and I said, look, I'm looking for a warrant officer's uniform from the First World War from the Royal Navy. Because that's what he got to. When he went back on the Endurance, he was designated a warrant officer. Now, he'd always been in ordinary ratings. And that's one of the reasons he went back with Shackleton, I believe, is because Shackleton said, you can be an officer. It was like,
he must have gotten along with Shackleton.
He did. He got on brilliantly with
Shackleton was
Shackleton.
half Irish as well, isn't he?
Well, Shackleton he was born in Ireland.
Yeah.
And his mother, certainly, I think his mother or his father came from the Shackleton line of Quakers from the Kildare stroke Waterford neck of the woods. Like his grandmother documented the atrocities in the 1898 rebellion. Where there were shot, young men were shot in a group in a small town. I can't remember. Please forgive me, everyone, but I wasn't thinking I was going to be talking about that. I hadn't genned up on that. But to go back to the Mary saying, would you stop him looking like a homeless man? So I went and rang Berman's and I said, I want this uniform. I said, I'll do it in that uniform. And they came back. They rang me back about an hour later. We've searched through our garments and said all we have are original 1917 warrant officer uniforms. And the biggest is a 36-inch chest. So they were all small little men.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, Jesus. So no wonder they used to talk about the Irish giant.
Yeah.
Because comparative, they were all probably 5'5", 5'6". It just shows you how we've grown and developed the better food and everything. We're all giants compared. But Tom was 5'11".
That's crazy.
And so comparatively, he was a giant. But he was a great friend of Shackleton.
Yeah.
Whether or not Shackleton was unusual, you see. Shackleton was a merchant Navy officer.
Right.
He was never in the Royal Navy because I don't think he ever did I think he. No one knows, but there's a feeling in the heads that kind of think about Shackleton and write about him that he probably knew he had a little bit of a funny heart. Maybe his father was a doctor, so maybe the father said, no, you won't get past the medical because he really wanted to be in the Royal Navy.
And for Shackleton to go on, that was the second journey to the Antarctica. He went with Shackleton.
He went. Yeah, Shackleton went with Scott on the ship called the Discovery.
Okay.
He then went back on his own expedition called the Nimrod.
Right, and that was all privatized. They were even like making a movie there.
They were. Shackleton always had was very media savvy, even in his day. You know, he was always getting sponsorship for movies. So even the Endurance, the famous one where they were stuck, and the man who was the cinematographer was called Hurley, and Hurley was a fantastic photographer, and I think Hurley's from New Zealand, but. Or he might be from England, again, forgive me. But he sent, after getting stuck in that ship, get crushed on the ice for 5 months, stuck on an island for 4 months, not knowing if they were going to be saved. Can you imagine the state of you?
Oh, yeah.
He then went back to England with Shackleton, and the film company said, there aren't enough images of birds and animals. So they sent Hurley back to South Georgia. To film penguins and seals. I think I would have said, you know what, you can stick it, I'm not going back. And that was the film called South.
They were probably eating all of them as well.
Yeah, exactly. But at least that was the film then, that's quite a famous film called South. And there would have been a black and white, silent movie that would have been produced. After the Endurance. But Shackleton then had to go around. He had kind of like a magic lantern show with all the slides, and he had to go around for months to fulfill the commitment he had made to the company for the Endurance, the money he got for the Endurance expedition that never succeeded.
Yeah.
But he was still contractually obligated to tour all over Britain with his magic lantern show.
So, like, what I was trying to get my head around as well, when they're setting sail, right? There was one that they said that Tom was in charge of the dogs and donkeys. So they brought like animals on the boat.
Animals. Well,
they were just trying to pull the sleds.
They brought. I think they brought 2, if not. They brought at least 1 combustion engine.
Okay.
With tracks.
Yeah.
They hadn't quite worked out that petrol freezes.
Yeah.
So they got 50 miles with this, and then it broke down, and they had to leave it. But they had all sorts. That was the Discovery particularly, and then they went. Captain Scott was a great innovator. He really believed in tried to bring modern technologies and stuff like that. So they brought all sorts of mad things with them for the first attempt. They brought a balloon.
But I'm sure they didn't know what they were expecting too. Obviously,
they didn't know how cold it would be. Because no one had ever been inside.
And apparently they thought it was 3 islands or something like that.
They had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
That was now Discovery.
Yeah.
There'd been various visits to the Antarctic by Belgians and of various other nationalities, Russians, who had only kind of got down the peninsula.
Yeah.
The peninsula that kind of sticks up towards South America. And they kind of ventured in there and then came back and then went a bit farther. But no one had really gone into the middle, so they didn't know what was in there. They had no clue. It's very hard for us to conceptualize that now. When we
nowadays,
know the nearest we can even dream of it is not knowing what the bottom of the sea is like, because we haven't really seen an awful lot of the bottom of the sea. But we know everything else. The nearest we can probably conceive is as we said earlier, it's like literally going to the moon.
Yeah.
And and the dark side of the moon.
And China just arrived there.
They did.
Yeah.
They'll be there before. They'll be everywhere, those fellas. But so there really wasn't. That's only 120 years ago.
That's mad, isn't it?
There was no radio communication. There was
lifetimes.
kind of sailing ships with a bit of an engine in it. You know, and they were going
a lot of luck.
Oh, Tom was blessed. You know what I mean? The things he managed to get out of. Yeah.
For 4 ships that went, 4
of those expeditions.
4 expeditions is right, lack of a better word. He's been on 3 of them.
3 of them.
And is he the longest one that has been out of everyone?
No, there was Frank Wilde.
Right.
Frank Wilde, who was another great stalwart of Shackleton. Frank Wilde was on Discovery, Nimrod, Terra Nova, and Endurance.
And they asked him to go on the last one as well,
he did.
but he was like...
It's a lovely story. He got a knee. I don't know if this is true, but this is in Michael's book. Telegram came from Cork.
Right.
And it was like the whole telegram. Enniscorn, 1920. So there's a story that they all were standing around him, but that's how I imagine anyway, waiting for him to see what's in the telegram. They probably were waiting for him, and but the telegram said we're going again, Tom. Right. That's what Shackleton wrote in the telegram.
Short and
and
sweet.
Tom wrote back apparently, I can't. I have a long-haired pal now. Which was either a reference to the wife. Sorry, Michal.
Oh, you're all right.
Which was either a reference to the wife or his 2 daughters, 3 daughters at that. Well, no, he had 1 daughter by 1920, so there's only 1 daughter.
If you were to meet Tom now, let's say you went into a time machine, or he came here, what would you try? What would be the first thing you'd ask him?
Gosh. Well, I wanted to say years ago, why did you go 3 times? Because he didn't go on the Nimrod, remember, he only went on 3. Why would you gone back 3 times, endangering your life? And I met a few people who had gone to the Antarctic, and 1 or 2...
Have you any notions yourself?
No. I went to the Antarctic on a cruise ship, and went in on a Zodiac and walked around for a while, just on that peninsula bit.
Yeah.
No, I've met. When I was doing the show first in the museums, people would often come to it and think I was some sort of explorer.
Oh, no way.
And one fella said to me once, a Russian fella said, "You come to Russia with me and we ski 3 degrees." I didn't know what I thought it was this band, you know, the women 3 degrees. What are you talking about? And I looked at him and I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes. Give me your name." He was really serious. He thought I was like an explorer. And then I said to him, "Is there a hotel?" And he kind of looked at me disgusted. I said, "I'm not an explorer." I had to explain it. 3 degrees, of course, is the longitude.
Oh,
and there's 60 miles between each degree, so 180.
Jesus.
You know what I mean? The old maths and the old logs and logarithms and stuff are all to do with all clocks, and that's all. It's mad. 60 degrees, 60 minutes in an hour.
That makes sense.
All that sort of stuff. And but anyway, so Oh, I don't know what I was talking about, Sean.
If you were to meet Tom.
Oh, if I was to meet Tom. So someone said to me, they said if you'd gone to the Antarctic, you'd know why he went back. Now I can't verify that, but that's the question.
I've seen on YouTube a clip of your play, and I'm really looking forward to going and seeing it as well. But you say, in the character of Tom Crean, people ask me why do I go to?
And he says because you've never been
to the land of, or to the end of the world. And that's why I've never been to the end of the world, and I want to go. You know what I mean?
Because but the answer in the show is what one of those explorers said to me that day when I said it was a Q&A after the show, and someone asked me what would I have asked Tom, and I said, why did you go 3 times? And this kind of a little bit arrogant kind of British explorer type stood up. Well, Aidan, I can tell you haven't been. And I felt like sticking 2 fingers up his nostrils. But I remember taking that home with me. And I remember thinking, that's quite important though. Because if that was the reason why Tom, because he never told anyone why he went back. His daughters wouldn't have known. He hardly ever talked. He hardly ever talked about it. He never talked about it, you see, for political, but also he was such a quiet man. And I remember thinking, I want to get that into the show. So what happens with the show, Sean, sometimes, not anymore, but for the first 10 years, let's say, I'd find a bit of information. I'd be thinking, how do I get that in?
Yeah.
How do I work that in now? So that's what then happened in that show. I got to that bit where it's like, why would you go? I come home and they say, is there something wrong with you? Why would you go? And I say, I look at the audience and I say, of course. You've never been. Yeah. As if Tom is answering them in his mind. And then it moves on. So you kind of glean these tiny little nuggets of things. So what would I ask Tom now? Crikey, I think I'd be dumb. It'd be like meeting Bruce Springsteen or Tom Cruise. You'd be like, oh God, Tom Crean is here. I'd probably want to verify, but the first thing I'd ask him, to be totally honest with you, Sean, is what I've done okay?
Okay.
To look for some sort of reassurance that he's happy with my portrayal of his story in a guise that isn't him, because he would never have. Yeah, I found that. He would have sat in front of 2 or 3 or 4 or 12 or 1,500 people. And he wouldn't have said a word.
Even they were saying, like, in his pub, people coming in and asking, but he wouldn't say anything. Like you said, it's all political. I think political, of the Times as well.
The Times, but also there was. I remember meeting a man called John Knightley, who was his godson.
No way.
John Knightley's father was the station master in Enniscorn for the Dingle train. Excuse me. And I had a lovely afternoon with John Knightley in Clonmel. Okay. No, yes, I was near Clonmel because he came to see the show in Clonmel, and I said, I want to come and talk to you. I wanted to be near someone who had really been with, because he used to go for a walk with Tom Crean every day after school.
No way.
Every day, John Knightley. And I said, what was he like? And he said, quiet man. And I'd say to him, I asked John Knightley, I said, John, why did you not talk about it? And he said, well, politically he didn't. He said, but also, Aidan, the only man, my father said, there's 2 men that came to the pub on occasions. And one was a solicitor from Dingle, and the other one was the local doctor. Kind of people who had an education, I suppose, and had an interest in the trip of Captain Scott. Because Scott was an enormous hero.
Yeah.
Like a cultural hero of the British Empire, because he died for the Empire, 1912. I believe there was a reaction in a non-media age akin to what happened when Diana died.
What?
Where everyone felt they knew her. You know, and we all felt, and there was lines of people to sign the memorial books. That was an equivalent kind of reaction in the word, because it was like he had sacrificed himself for the empire.
And he got to the South Pole and then
died
on the way back.
And he was beaten, and he died. So it was like there was so many elements that was like, oh my God, oh you poor man. Yeah. And so Scott was a huge hero. So Tom knew Scott.
Yeah.
So he was quite close to Scott. Not like he would have been close in friendship with Shackleton because of the officer man kind of stuff,
Yes.
you know. But he would have known Scott really well in that relationship in the Navy.
Even when he went back to find, didn't he found
and
Scott's body?
he cried and he kissed him.
And he kissed
you know,
him,
but
the
that,
Irish
but
goodbye.
the Irish goodbye,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
And of
class.
course the English think, what are you kissing for? What's it all about?
Yeah.
But that I remember, you know, you go to the coffin and you give a quick kiss of someone who's quite close to you, and that's what he did. But what were we talking about again? I can't remember.
Oh, we went on. You want Tom Crean's nephew.
Oh yeah, John Knightley.
John Knightley.
John Knightley. And I asked John, why didn't you talk to them? He said, Aidan, these were men who lived in mountains, who were scratching a living. And when they came down to a pub, to be honest with you, Aidan, this is my father, he remembers this as a kid, the price of the local butter in the mart and whatever the creamery was paying was so important because they were scratching a living in the Dingle Peninsula, halfway up a bloody mountain, as we know, with a few animals. He said, to be honest with you, Aidan, talking about the Antarctic was the last thing on their minds. They couldn't have given them monkeys about it.
Yeah.
And put into that mix then the British, he'd been with the British Navy, the new country, the returning men who had fought in the First World War and even after were kind of, depending on the area of Ireland, were treated kind of almost like traitors to the new country. And all that was flying around. So Tom just put his head down and said nothing about it.
See, when Tom put his head down, how was he seen in the local? Because he was a publican at that
Well,
time.
his wife was the real publican. Nell was the expert on the pubs.
Yeah.
She was from a family that had run a pub. She'd been in a pub from her birth, you know. So she knew all the ins and outs of pubs. And again, another story Eileen told me. The mother, Nell, was in the Irish Women's Institute or some sort of society like that, and they had a night away in Dingle.
ICA or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was a night away in Dingle. So Tom was left with the pub. And Eileen was very much, Mary was very glamorous like the mother in a way, but Eileen was the girl who pulled the pints and was a bit more homely, I suppose, or a bit more worky kind of mentality. Anyway, so she was working with Tom the night the mother was gone. And Mary didn't have to work in the pub at all. You know, Mary, the older daughter, was you know, again the kind of glamorous kind of type. Eileen was the hard worker. Anyway, Eileen was in the pub with the father, and the barrel went empty.
Yeah.
And of course, it was in the old days, where there was a certain amount of carbon in but it wasn't pumped like nowadays. You know, there was
hand pumped.
It was hand pumped, but there was a little bit of yeast built up. So when he uncorked it with the pot, with a bit of wood, he shot up, and he was trying to stop it. And all he said to Eileen, this is indicative now of how little he did in the pub.
Okay.
In practical terms, he was hardly ever behind the bar, I think, at all. He turned to Eileen and said, "Don't tell your mother."
No,
don't tell her. I lost half the barrel. You know what I mean? But so I don't really think he. Now again, I don't think I'm being unfair. If ever a family member watching this, was what's that Dooley talking about? I don't think publican life was really for him, but he bought the pub and managed the pub with the few bob he had because he got a good pension because he had become an officer, etc., because that was her expertise.
Right.
Really. So that was John Knightley. Go back to John again. John said his mother was Tom's cousin, and Tom would come up to see the father quite a lot. Because the father also got the Daily Mail for him about 4 days late, and he'd come up and what came in on the train was kind of like the nuts and bolts of the town, if you know what I mean. So he'd get the paper from England, and the Daily Mail was where you saw who got promoted to what in the Navy, and Tom was always very interested in that. But John Knightley said the mother used to lock the door when Tom would be coming up the road, up the lane to the house, because he'd always come up, let's say at 5, 6 o'clock after the tea, and the kids, he'd want to play with the kids.
Right.
And he'd get the kids all hyped, and they wouldn't go to bed.
Yeah.
So the mother used to lock the door to keep them out. So he obviously had a great love of kids and the energy from kids and stuff like that. They're the only people who he talked about the Antarctic to, down by the bridge in Anniscall. He used to have they used to gather, and he'd tell them stories about the South Pole, and he always had a bag of a pocket full of sweets. Now nowadays we think, what had he got? But I think he was very genuinely like, you just have the sweets, just generous with the kids. And of course you'd get a sweet once a year probably in Anniscall in 1919 and 1920. You know what I mean? So a boiled sweet would have been a treasured thing. I had a lovely story. I remember part of my issue always with the show is it gets too long. So I'm often thinking, what do I cut out? Or if I'm doing a really long stint, like I did 8 weeks in New York.
Yeah, I want to start and go back as well. Can we pause that for a second?
Will.
So you started off in AIB Bank, and you said, scratch this, I'm going to go to acting school. What brought that on for yourself?
Drama. I was doing amateur drama. I loved amateur drama in
Ireland.
Ireland.
From the kid, like from the get-go?
No, well, in secondary school.
Yeah.
In primary school as well, the national school, we had a teacher who wrote his own version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Okay.
And I managed to get a picture of that. That was in like 5th class. And then so when I went to the secondary school, they did a musical every year. Mm. Now most fellas got involved in the musical because girls from the Convent of Mercy used to be in it as well. You know, the usual stuff. But I went in because I just loved being on stage. Yeah. And I didn't know I loved it. So I did when I was in first year, I got a part in Smike, which is kind of like a musical, and I got the part of Smike.
You're a baritone singer as well, aren't you?
Oh, I don't know what I am, Sean.
No?
I don't know.
I've seen that on your...
I could. Well, no, you're in your CV, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you kind of have to give yourself a title that I can carry a song.
Okay, right.
I can carry a song, and singing tutors would say you're a baritone for the purpose of.
Right.
But I would never expect anyone to pay to hear me sing.
Right,
we'll
hit this one out now.
You know what I mean?
This one lovely.
As an actor, you can sing. You can carry a song in a play or a few lines, okay. But someone wouldn't pay £20 to come in and hear me sing. You know what I mean? Or they'd be asking for their money back very fast. But so I was doing amateur drama in school, and then when I went to the bank had an amateur drama society, so I joined them. And then I joined a group in Dublin, where in Ireland there's all these amateur drama festivals, all in the old days generated by the local priests to give the men something to do when they had promised that they wouldn't be drinking for Lent.
Really?
Holy shit. But that was the control that they had, you know what I mean? But so a lot of these festivals then take place in the months of March and April. And then there's an All Ireland festival. If you win a certain amount of the festivals, you can then be in the All Ireland, and that's like eight shows, one show a night for 7 or maybe 2 weeks, and then you're adjudicated. And I loved it. I loved the camaraderie, but I loved the performing. An awful lot of people in the amateur drama scene in Ireland are excellent because the country's so small that they could never have made a living as a professional, but they have the talent to be professional.
Yes, okay.
And so the quality of the amateur drama scene in Ireland was at that stage, especially in the 80s, you know, when there was no jobs and you got a job, you stuck to it, you know what I mean, a bit like super glue. But if you therefore were in plays with excellent actors. Yeah. And I just hated the bank.
Yeah.
I can't describe to you how much. If I had gone straight in to give people, and we're giving people loans, and are meeting people for coffee and chatting, but I was doing jobs that was the same job every day.
It's very black and white.
Oh Christ! And you'd be getting a report from that person in that department, and that department, and that department, and the days that you wouldn't be too busy would be like between the 10th and the 20th of the month. because the first 10 days of the month are very busy, and the last 10 days of the month.
You're closing up.
Oh Jesus, and I enjoyed being the cashier in the bank because you'd be meeting people. I'd be chatting, you'd get to know people who came in from the different shops and stuff, and you'd always have a bit of a laugh. But then you had all this stuff to do at the table behind you. Yeah. And that was boredom personified. And I remember in Grafton Street, there was about 2 or 3 of us who just despised the job. And we had a club. And it was a special club, but only 3 of us in it. It said, I hate Friday because Monday is only 2 days away. and I think when you're in a club like that, because of a job, you shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah.
But I could have been. If I hadn't found acting, if I hadn't found a love, I would still be in the bank.
Yeah,
because that's what you do. And you come to terms with that boredom. You come to terms, but if you find a passion of another sort, like those fellas, when I told them I was leaving the bank, the fellas who were working in the bank, they were, what? What are you going to do? What are you doing? You're going acting? Jesus Christ! My mother nearly had a heart attack. Bless her. You know what I mean? To get into the bank was in her head nearly like to have a priest in the house. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I remember.
So you went over to England to study.
I kind of got AIB to transfer me to England.
Oh, that's a great.
Because I knew I kind of knew instinctively.
Well, there's no AIB in England, though, is there?
There were in the 80s. Yeah, there was a lot of AIB branches and Bank of Ireland branches because they were servicing a lot of the construction companies. Yes, that at that stage were Irish were all over the place, building. And not as much now, but then there was a lot of work, a lot of branches in Ireland, in England. And what had happened was that I'd been told you're not going to get to England. So I was starting to come to terms, working in Grafton Street, that I would be probably, this is my lot. And then suddenly, I applied to go to England, but because of the deal when you were transferred, the union had such good deals for you that the bank had stopped transferring people. And they were doing what they call local recruits, where they'd be advertising for jobs in the branches in England from the English people.
I was just going to say it, yeah.
So it had totally dried up. And then Allied Irish banks had, the union, the IBOA, had a strike in England. Okay. Is this boring? I don't know. No. They had a strike in England.
Yeah.
And part of the deal was, with the union, was to rectify the amount of staff shortages in the branches.
Okay.
So of course, the powers that be in the bank just turned then on personnel department in Dublin and said, we need people in England. Oh, ideally, and I'll never forget it. I was on my machine because at this stage I was putting, you know, when you wrote your £50 lodgement and your account number, and that's what I was doing for 8 hours a day. You know what I mean? Can you imagine? I was off my head. Anyway, the bank manager floated in front of me. He was a small man. He was the type of man that even had a bowler hat. At that stage, and this is in the early 80s, he was of that ilk. And he floated in front of me and he said, Aidan, do you still want to go to England? And of course, I hadn't applied. I'd applied a year and a half before.
And nothing back?
I had forgotten about it. And suddenly he was standing in front of me. Do you want to go to England? And that's what he said, I can see you're struggling.
Oh.
And he said, I need to know in 15 minutes.
Oh, what? Jesus Christ. There's no whole, ringing the parents going, what you make of this?
Oh, the parents might have said go for it. But I remember thinking, oh. And I went down to the loo. And I remember I decided not to ask anyone.
Yeah.
I thought I should just go with my gut. Just go with your gut, Aidan. What's the point in going to ask? What they know more than you would know.
So funny.
So I went up to him and I said, I'll go to England.
So funny, you go to England, but then Tom Crean goes to Antarctica.
So by being in England, I started going to night school in England.
Right.
And of course, it's very hard again for even my wife and kids to understand this. I was living in a cocoon of people who worked in the bank. You played football with the bank, you played soccer, you played Gaelic games. Even in England, you worked with the people in the bank. So the whole mentality was bank, and this is your life and this is your work. And I started going to these night schools in London. And I was meeting British people of all different colours and all different backgrounds, and they were saying, "You're very good at this, Aidan. You should go to drama school." And I said, "Oh no, I can't. I'm working the bank." And they were going, "What's wrong with you? Is there something wrong with you? Why would you want to stay working in the bank?"
Wow.
So I was getting this, and of course that then slowly had a positive effect. I eventually said, "Yeah, why am I staying in this job that I hate?"
Do you think that's the Irish mentality of you can't take a compliment kind of thing?
Well, possibly that, but
Yeah.
well, yeah. When you mean when they say you're very good at this?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of, I was. They were saying that to say to me that you should be taking this on.
Yeah, 100%.
You should be going. You should be going. You have a good enough imagination to be a professional performer, so you should go for it. And I, of course, was batting that back in practical terms, saying, "But I work in a bank. I can't."
Yeah.
And then I eventually said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to go for it." And I remember ringing my mother, and just silence on the other end of the phone, and I left in 1985, 87 rather. I went to drama school in 1987.
Never looked back since then.
Never looked back since. But life isn't a rosy, you know. My wife is an actor as well.
Yeah.
So I met her at drama school. So two of us trying to scrape a living in England. And then the kids started to come. It was like, maybe I should go back and work in the bank. You know? But I didn't. I stayed with it. You know what I mean?
Tom Crean
Yes.
is not the only play that you wrote yourself.
No, I did O'Sullivan Beara.
Yeah, and when it comes to acting, and like you always do mostly theatre act, is there a reason for you to prefer that than?
No, Sean. Just the other one never happened.
No.
The TV and the film work. I was only talking to the lads at lunch today. Some of Harry's friends, and I was explaining to them when I came out of drama school. I'd gone to a reasonably good drama school, but not the very best. The very best drama schools, like the RADAs and the Lambdas, they get agents to come and see their final show, and they get cherry picked, and then those agents are like trying to get into Fort Knox. And they're the ones who the casting people for the films go to. So often the food chain for telly and film is, when you're farther down the food chain, you don't get a look in at all. It's very hard to get a look in. You could be the most talented creature in the world if you're not in that top set. And I remember getting a couple of auditions because I was Irish, and I've always worked on the Irish niche market in England. I'm always been an Irish actor. I'm not good enough at the English accent to be paid to be an English actor.
Yeah,
I can't get rid of the eye. I don't have a good ear. I can do Irish accents because they're kind of in your psyche.
You're nearly bred in you, yeah.
But to do a really good, and also the name gives it away as well, because you go into a casting and your name is Aidan Dooley, they're going to be thinking, "Oh, this guy's Irish. He's not English." You know what I mean? So then they'll hear the little twang.
Yeah.
In the well, at that stage anyway, like the likes of Cillian Murphy is a very Irish name, but he is beautiful. He's a fantastic delivery.
What I've noticed as well is, this is completely side part, but it's similar enough. Christian Bale, he's English, but when he did Batman, the Batman Returns, and all of the Batman, there's another one coming out now, but he actually did his interviews in an American accent afterwards, and he felt like he was asked way after, like, why did you do the interviews in American? He's like, because Batman himself, like Bruce Wayne is a staple of America. Like, I couldn't do that to the actual character. Wow. I was like, wow, you're going fair far into it there, aren't you?
But what happened with, but that's taking it probably a bit too far, isn't it? But what happened with me was that the couple of interviews I did, one was for EastEnders, a small part now in EastEnders, but in my head, I couldn't stop thinking, oh my God, if I get this job, you know, like you would, you know, like 99% of people would be like that. Yeah. Oh my God, I could be on telly, like I'll be famous. And you go in there and you do your read, and I think the really good producers and casting people can tell whether you're nervous. And part of what they don't want is you then getting a gig and being nervous and tightening up and not flowing.
Yes, of course.
And I unfortunately didn't have enough I didn't have, I suppose it's my nature really. I was not big-headed enough to be so confident, to not have those feelings in the interview. And I wish I had been, but then I wouldn't be the person I am if I had been like that. So a lot of the people who get those first gigs have a confidence in themselves that I just didn't have, you know.
Where did that confidence come from to do this monumental task of a one-man show then?
Well, I did it was just doing it regularly. The museum work that I did.
Yeah.
Okay, the museum work. A lot of actors, again, if you're in the situation I was in, every job is then almost like a torture because you're terrified of getting it wrong. Okay, when you're doing it and you get the audience and everything. I did museum work. It's like 7 days a week for 5 or 6 years. And I remember the best challenge I ever had was I was doing a magic lantern show, showing an audience a magic lantern show. And I got dressed up and I'd have the white paint on, which is what they used to do in the 1880s and 1870s, touring these magic lantern shows. So, and they were quite popular, especially at holidays. Might be 250 people in the lecture theatre. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to stand there until they start laughing.
And say nothing.
Say nothing.
Yeah.
Now, I couldn't have done that. I wouldn't have had the balls to do that, or I wouldn't have had the experience to do it. What happened with me was I realized a little bit into the museum work that an audience wants you to do well.
Yeah.
And when you go out and you're nervous, they can sense that, and they're nervous for you, and they don't want, and then that creates the tightness,
the tension. Yeah.
And if you just don't, there's a paradox. Of course, you want to do well, but you also you have to try and pretend you don't want to do well. There's a strange paradox in acting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's probably the same in sport as well. You know, the guys that go out and play brilliantly in the World Cup final is because they somewhere in their psyche they don't know they're playing in the World Cup final.
100%.
You know, they've convinced themselves or pretend or whatever.
It's just another day.
So the museum work for me prepared me to be able to go out in front of an audience, a live audience. And to be honest with you, I remember when I did the Olympia for the first time and there was 1,200 people out in the audience. I go out with Tom. I have pictures of Tom in the dressing room. I talk to Tom in the dressing room.
No way.
I talked to him, I said, Tom, and I have a picture of him with the pipe, and I put my hand on his face before every performance. And I would say, be with me, Tom, especially if I'm it's a big gig. Yeah. I said, help me now tonight. So I thought it sounds a bit arty-farty, but or be a bit strange, you know. But I think he comes out with me, and that gives me a certain amount of steel.
Yeah.
And I also, in my head, know, Sean, that if I make a mistake, who knows? I'm the only one on. There's no other actor that says, he didn't say his line properly. You know what I mean?
I was listening to a podcast with it's Lex Friedman with Kevin Spacey, and they were talking about Shakespeare at the very beginning. He was making these long monologues, and the main actor was on the whole time. And he would come back in and give out to Shakespeare for making these long plays. And he'd be always on. He'd never get a break. But it seems like you don't get a break. Like, how did you build yourself up to do a one-man show?
Well, oh God, Jesus, how do I shorten this? What happened was, I was doing it in the museum.
Yeah.
20 minutes. Michael Smith's book was published.
Yeah.
I suddenly thought, my God, there's all this extra material. So I started to build that material. I would read a couple of stories that Michael wrote.
Actually, sorry as well, before this, did you have a character in your head for the 20 minutes?
No, but how do I describe this as well to you? If I had been a character like Tom, where an audience come in and lights come on and they're dedicated and they're going to be with you for 20 minutes, I could have done a quieter man version of the show. It could have been a quieter man, more humble. The first time I did Tom Crean was in an open area in the museum in Greenwich, where people were standing. and I had to hold their attention using my personality. There was no stage, there was no lights, nothing.
Oh, wow.
So it'd be like having 20 or 30 people there. They turned up to my announcement. Come and hear the story of Tom Crean at 12 o'clock in the whatnot area.
Yeah.
So they'd turn up. I'd be Tom sitting there, and I'd be chatting to them, telling them to stand. I'd be talking, in a minute, and I'd be peeling off me pretend tobacco, rolling it into the pipe, and then when I think there'd be enough people there, and I'd see the clock, I'd then launch into it. But I had to hold their attention for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
So I would be using my nickname for my father's nickname was Hands Dooley.
Yeah.
And I use my hands all the time. So I would use my personality to very much to hold their attention.
Yeah.
And even when the show was doing really well in the museum and it went into a small room, I still used my personality to marry their interest in Tom.
Yeah.
So I kind of decided that if that's the triangle, in other words, the audience see in me a characterization, a personality that they like, then they will like Tom Crean. Let's call it my hold on to the audience person, almost like street theatre.
Yeah.
And I would keep them entertained for about 20 minutes, and I'd tell the story. Mostly I'd tell the story of the Scott expedition.
At that time, do you even know Tom? Like, have you heard of Tom before?
No, I'd never heard of Tom.
No way.
When they came to me, when the boss of the theatre company said, Aidan, I've just had a meeting with the National Museum in Greenwich, and they're doing a big exhibition, and they found this character called Crean, who's unusual because he went with Scott and Shackleton.
No way.
And they had no interest in Tom. They just wanted a working class character, because if you were a posh character in England in a museum, the people don't like you. They have immediate kind of.
You kind of want to
so
be.
You want to be. So they'll talk about. Let's say if they were doing an exhibition on Nelson, let's say, they would never have Nelson as the actor playing Nelson, because so many people would say, "Oh, he didn't look like that." Or
Yeah, he didn't do it right.
So what you do is you do Nelson's butler.
Oh, okay.
To talk about Nelson. So that's that's what I mean by the triangle in a sense.
Yeah.
I had never heard of Tom Crean, and he gave me an A4 sheet of paper that the curator from the museum had given him to give to whoever he was bestowing the job on. And all it had was the diary references to Tom Crean, and it filled just one page. So then you were told, okay, you had to last for 20 minutes.
20
you had to write
minutes
a 20-minute script. So we just looked at, and then there was another actor doing it with me, because this was going to be every day. So you couldn't be one actor every day. You'd be going off the head altogether. doing four shows a day forever, or for the duration of the exhibition, which was about 6 months. So John used to alternate. This guy John used to alternate with me, and because the museum was so stingy, we wrote a script together, but then we never saw each other's work after that.
Oh,
so,
what?
So he took his Tom Crean story, and I had my Tom Crean story.
Oh my God.
Because you kind of did it in situ.
Yeah.
You kind of wrote a script.
He's on your yeah.
But also you wrote a script that kind of kept the curators happy, which had all the detail.
Yes.
But you knew that group of people standing out there, if I just read that script, they'd all walk away.
Yeah.
So you created the theatricality on the basis of the script with the people, and that's why mine was different from his.
Yes, of course.
Because we never had crossover. Because they only pay me to go in on Mondays and Wednesdays and Saturdays. And he went in on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going in on a Tuesday if I wanted. They weren't paying me. So that was the reality of the game. So I developed my Tom Crean 20 minutes, and then Michael Smith's book was published, and so therefore Michael's book had the stories. So I would read a couple of the stories, and then I'd try it out. I'd try and remember how, and then I'd try and think, well, what? And if they were bored with the story, I would think, okay, that's my fault. So I'd go back and I'd try to think, how would I make it better? How would I make it keep their interest? So the show got longer and longer. The 20 minutes then became an hour. And I was supposed to be doing a show every hour. So, but my determination to tell Tom's story, was, okay, well, I'll do 50 minutes, and then I'll send them in the museum. I'll send them off, and then the next crowd will be queuing up. I'd run off and do the announcement, and then the next crowd for the 1 o'clock. So there'd be a 12 o'clock show, the 1 o'clock show, the 2 o'clock show, the 3 o'clock show. And of course, there was no break, because I was supposed to be getting 40 minutes break.
Yeah.
So it went on, and of
You're
course,
just doing this for the love of
the love of Tom Crean, because when you went up to the exhibition, Sean, the big exhibition, because I was doing it in the floor, and then they put me in a little room, and then and then as the show was getting more positive, then they gave me a light. I'd one theatre light, and I had a little box, and people came into the room. I wasn't out in the open. But when you went into the museum exhibition, there was one mention of Tom Crean. And that was because he gave the...
Like you said, he was that blue collar guy.
He wasn't mentioned in this either.
Yeah.
He wasn't mentioned, and even Michael's book came out after the start of the exhibition. So to be fair to them, they weren't poked with a biography to say, well, hang on a minute, maybe we should have this guy in. There was nothing about Tom Crean apart from the fact that I think he gave a gift to Edgar Evans, was one of the men who died with Captain Scott.
Yes. And
Edgar Evans was a really good friend of Tom's. And he went, when he came back from the Terranova, he went to Edgar Evans' family, and he gave them, I think a couple of sledge, the skis. He gave the family his skis, and they were on the pub wall.
Oh, no way.
For years. And those skis were in the exhibition. So there was nothing in the care journey about Tom Crean did this or Tom Crean did that. Tom wasn't mentioned, except the fact that he'd given Edgar Evans skis. And I read Michael's book, and I said, you effing so-and-sos, you've done it again to Tom. Here's this big exhibition celebrating these events, and Tom Crean is forgotten again. So I had a knot in my stomach. And you get that knot of injustice, and I felt I'm going to tell his story, because the brief I'd been given by the museum, Sean, at the very outset with the sheet of paper, was you were to tell the difference between Scott and Shackleton. That was the reason for the 20 minutes. The butler.
Yeah, of course.
Let's imagine the butler was going to tell you the difference between Nelson when he was 20 or another character, let's say another. So this person here knew both of them. Yes. But the reason he was telling the story from the museum's perspective was to tell the story about the two men.
Yeah, of course.
Not about Tom Crean. So I set off, and a curator never came to see me and check up on me. So I was away with Tom Crean's story. So I developed the entirety around Tom Crean. And that 50 minutes was really the first half of the show. And every now and again, I would do, because every now and again I would say, oh God, I won't do the Scott story. I'll do the Shackleton story. So every now and again, I do the Shackleton story, but that was a bit by the seat of my trousers, because I'd be trying to remember a bit, and a lot of an and on, and then this happened. But the story was strong enough, you see. The content was strong enough to hold people's attention. Sometimes in the museum work, in the science museum, you'd be asked to tell the metallurgical story of steel.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be your job. So you'd have a 15-minute brief to tell how steel is made. So you'd find ways to talk about pig iron and carbon and Bessemer converters in a fun way, but the content was boring.
Yeah, of course.
Except for the geeks, who might like it. The majority of people go, what are you talking about steel for? So I had developed quite a good technique of how to keep an audience entertained.
Yeah, right.
With boring material. So you marry that technique with fantastic story.
Yes.
You could keep people really engaged. And that's how it started.
When you created the whole story, when did you feel confident to go off on your own then and separate from the museum?
Well, what the museum did, the museum brought me to Tralee. They flew me over to Tralee. They were so pleased with the show. They flew me over to Tralee, and I performed the show in Shim Satira. And everyone, the 2 daughters came to see it. And this is the first time I'd done it outside the museum. I didn't know whether this was good, bad, or indifferent when you took it out of the context of the exhibition.
Well, you were also saying as well, at the same time, Michael Smith's book, was that blowing up at the exact same time, or you were literally...
I was a little bit ahead of the curve,
little bit ahead of
but
him
Michael's
as well.
book had been published,
Yeah.
but it hadn't been really promoted as Michael eventually did in Ireland, and it started to really gain momentum.
Cool, wow.
And then the big thing, you see all these elements, Sean, I don't know how these, you'd have to edit this to hell.
Oh, don't worry, it's fine. It's okay. I'm interested in it.
What happened then was, in about 2004, 2005, the Guinness ad.
Oh,
Do you remember the Guinness ad?
I remember the Guinness ad, yeah.
The Guinness ad made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I was then, after 2004, I was touring around Ireland.
Yeah.
Going to Clonmel and going to, Ballinasloe. And
what year were you down in the Cook-on-Barra?
that was 2009.
That's what I heard.
So 2005, 2006, 2007, I was touring around Ireland. And people, there's a certain amount. It's a bit like we met a young lad today, a hurler over from Belfast, who's in some club. And Harry said, "Have you heard of Tom Crean?" He says, "No." "You've heard of Shackleton?" "No." You didn't have a clue. So an awful lot of people in Ireland didn't know anything. And even with Michael Smith's book, they wouldn't have known anything. But they knew the Guinness ad.
They knew the Guinness ad, but they also know. I remembered Crean from secondary school. He was on the curriculum.
By then, we're not. But Sean,
the Iceman. Yeah.
that's Michael's book.
That's Michael's book as
That's
well.
Michael's
but he made
children's
a kids
book.
version.
He made a kids version. But this is before that.
Yeah. Oh, of course, of course.
And what happened was, and theatres used to be saying, "I can't believe this." The Guinness ad, groups of men, would go out for a couple of pints and then go to the theatre to see my show. And the theatres would have, obviously, it was computerised by that stage, so they'd have names. And he said, the manager would come to me, a couple of theatres, he said, "Aidan, 70% of the people in that audience have never been in this theatre."
No way.
Never. And we can't, it's amazing. And because there were groups of walkers and hill climbers and sailors, people who wouldn't normally go, they might go to a panto, maybe on a Christmas, if they had to. But they were now coming to the theatre to see this story because they didn't necessarily want to read the whole book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Give it to me in an hour.
Give me a show. You know what I mean? And I think I have no date, I have no survey to support that, but I think there was a lot of that going on. So I was packing
just
out.
like Tom Knight writing a diary.
Yeah, exactly. So the show was hugely successful. And then, of course, when you get 100% seats sold in a theatre in Ballinasloe, and you go and you email them 2 years later or 3 years later, and you say, "Will you have it back?" They say, "Of course we will." Full again. 5 years later, "Will you have it?" "Of course we will." So the show has gone back and back and back and back. And people keep seeing the show.
Yeah.
People come back to see the show.
The amount
which
of
is
people
phenomenal.
that I've talked to, especially Tom, the bar manager, he's not working today, but I rang him to book this. And I was like, "Oh, I'm having you on." And he was like, "I've seen him Dublin 2 times." I was like, "What? I can't. Yeah, this is crazy."
The book that you very kindly, a bit of research. When I was promoting that book, I would often sell it after the show.
Yeah.
And I'd sign it. "Saw your show 7 times, Aidan. Saw your show 10 times, Aidan."
No way.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I said, "Would you want? You could do it then for me tomorrow night, could you?" You know what I mean? You could do it. You could perform it for me. But I don't know. They just love the story, and it nourishes them. Tom's story nourishes something in us that, like what I said at the very start, he is the goodness in humanity, and we would love to be like him if we were faced with such adversity. And And if there's difficulty in their lives, people often love to hear the story for them to think, yeah, I can get through this. So it is a phenomenon.
It is. What I was going to say, when did you develop the character, the onstage character of Tom, your character of Tom Crean, and when did you decide to do the Kerry accent?
I was doing the Kerry, or a version of the Kerry accent for the English ear, but I was very lucky, Sean. I was in a play, I was in Philadelphia, Here I Come, in the mid-90s, early 90s, the mid-90s, with Eamon Kelly.
Right, okay.
And Eamon Kelly was a Shanachie from and around the Anniscall area, actually, from the Dingle Peninsula. And he was also from the place where the Puck Fair is. That's where he lived. He lived around there as well. Wherever that is, I can't remember. And I sat in a dressing room, or I was in a play with Eamon Kelly, and he had this lovely accent, right? And you're probably too young, but he would be on the telly.
Oh,
he'd be on the telly telling stories. Yeah. He'd wear a hat, and he'd tell, in my father's time, wasn't it? My father's time. And he had, you never got to know Eamon in the dressing room even, because everything was a story.
No.
Everything was a story, or else he'd be very quiet. So I kind of thought to myself, well, if I can replicate that grow in his voice, that love in his voice for words and for telling stories, and the R and the da-da-da, I'll be on the way to being a Kerry storyteller.
No way.
And that's where that developed, the Kerry accent and kind of some of the interaction with the audience. The moment when you see it, one of the most important moments in the show is when I first come out on stage and I just look at the audience and I smile.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that feeling of being in front of the 200 with the white face and waiting for the. You're saying to the audience, I'm here to give you a good time. You're in good hands. And I'm Tom Crean, and I'm going to tell you my story. And that feeling is very important in the whole entirety of the show. But I go back again. The content is real, and that kind of, I think that makes people think, my God, they really did this. What I'm telling them is real facts, and that then has a different feel than if I was a pretend character telling a pretend story of a one-man show. All the while, in the back of people's heads, sitting there, they know this is what these men really did.
Yeah.
And that gives a sort of a credibility and integrity to it that also makes it more emotionally
attached to it.
Attached to it.
Yeah. We have my old lad. We'd always watch movies. When we were growing up, we'd watch movies together or whatever, and like family sit down and watch movies. But if there was ever a true story, at the very end, when the reading comes up, he'd read it out loud, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a sucker for a true story." I think everyone is.
Everyone is a real one.
Yeah.
If you know it's a true story, especially if you know it.
Especially when it touches home for an Irish person as well. Big time.
And there's a couple of moments in it that I do challenge an audience theatrically.
Yes.
Like I stopped the show at one. I talked to the audience directly. I asked the audience, I say, I'm from this town. Do you know it? And there's nothing back. They're all sitting there. But in the museum, you see, the contact was so real that I'd say, do you know it? And they say, no, you don't. So when I put it into the big theatres, I thought, I'm going to keep that.
Yeah.
So I'd look at them and I go, is there? And I go, and then they twig. They start to laugh. He's expecting us to answer. So I get them to answer. Even England, I did it in England last week.
Yeah.
I did it in England in a town called Devices. All English people now. And I got to that moment and I said, boom, da-dum. No one. There was one person who went, yeah. And then I make a joke. It's like, what do you mean? Yeah. You either have or you haven't. And then I stand up and I say, because I joke about the fact that I can't see. People don't often realize, a lot of people in the audience don't realize what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is, are you out there at all? I've been talking to myself for 10 minutes, And I go out to the front and I'll say, and then in Devices, for instance, this show last week, I said, well, you've heard it now, haven't you? So I'll now go back and I'll sit back down there and I'll ask you, and I expect you to all answer in the affirmative.
Yeah.
Collectively, all of you. So I didn't do kind of like as if I'm reversing. I come from Owen-Inchgall. Have you heard of it? Yes! And that interaction means then they're buying into, they know that I'm not Tom.
Yes.
They know
Yeah.
it's the secret of theatre is everyone knows it's real. Film, you see, you almost are convinced that it's real, that it's you know it's not real. The cinema is so convincing that we actually think it's real.
Yes, 100%.
When we're watching it.
Especially
when you go
because
to a theatre, you know, the person that has two legs there, and you know if they cough, they're real. So they're telling me a story of 100 years ago. I know it's not real. But the joy, the beauty of theatre is that people decide to disbelieve in the reality, and they believe in the pretense of the theatrical experience.
100%. Yeah.
And I've stumbled across a joy of interacting with the audience as a man from 100 years ago, and they know I'm not real, and I know I'm not real. I know I'm not Tom Crean, but they buy into it. And that's quite powerful as you go through the actual story, because they start to see the pain of the character on stage, and then they're emotionally involved in it.
On the clip of another clip on YouTube as well is you're explaining your clothes.
Yeah.
And you have a strap and it's tied to a sled.
Yeah.
And you're running and you're literally like running on the spot.
Yes.
But it's pretty physical for you what you're doing, right? And you're explaining that you're pulling 800 pounds between four men. That's literally a man short of our own body weight.
Yeah.
And then while you're running on the spot, you need to start coughing. And I'd say maybe you had a cold that week, but it adds to the whole scene as well. Like, it's
but also I put my head down and I fall.
Yeah.
And then I talk about if you fall, you have to get back up, because you don't want to let the men down. And some people say to me, that's the moment. That kind of sequence is when they go to Antarctica with me. Yeah. It kind of brings them in. It brings them into Antarctica and the whole story. It's like they're focused in on it. Like an old lady, and she's been going to theatre all her life. I was talking to the man in the theatre afterwards, and she said, "Oh, she comes here all the time." She was 90, and I went out to meet a few people in the bar afterwards, and she was sitting there. She came up to me. She says, "I just want you to know that was the most incredible piece of theatre I've ever seen."
Wow.
And she's been going to loads of things. But she said, I was totally engrossed. I was there. I was on that sledge flying down at 60 miles an hour. I was there when you found the body of Scott. She said, it was just, I was just there. She was, but how can you not think, isn't that fantastic? That I've developed this thing that can create that amazing reaction in people. But Tom keeps me grounded, because I know if I start getting big-headed and full of myself, I lose the very essence of the show.
And that's the whole essence of Tom himself, even.
Yeah. And if I start thinking, oh, I'm talking great Jack the Lad, great this, I will lose the very beauty, the very goose that laid the egg, you know.
Because you've got awards and you've been around the world. You've travelled yourself. Like, where's the coolest place have you been?
Well, I went to the Antarctic and did the show in the Antarctic on the peninsula on a ship. Yeah, and then they put me on the ice and I did the last 15 minutes on the Antarctic Peninsula.
No way.
Yeah, and then the captain of the cruise ship loved the show. He was a Russian fella. He loved the show, and then he wanted me to put me on the spit that they survived on Elephant Island. The little bit that's now eroded to nearly nothing. And he was in the Zodiac, and he put me on my own, and in the Zodiac, I want you to get on there. I want you to see this and feel this in Aidan in his Russian accent. And he'd gone in on the Zodiac with me. And he was at the back with the outboard motor, and I'm at the front to jump off. And he's going in, and I went, no, I better not. No, I better not. I did 3 times, and he called me back, and he said, Aidan, I can put you on, but I don't think I can get you off. So I said, okay, that's no problem. Bring me back to the ship. I'm okay. Bit like the hotel again, you know. But so the coolest place, I don't know, Sean. I was in Dubai.
I read
in Buenos Aires.
No, I read in an article that you met Gay Byrne, and it was a pretty funny story.
Well, all my life,
This was back in
I was in one
maybe.
channel land, like you were in Clare. Like we got they got one channel land. Well, maybe not you, but definitely in the 70s, 60s, and 70s was. And the Late Show was like, and Gay Byrne in our house was. You know, in some houses, Gay was hated by the father and loved by the mother and all this sort of stuff. Both my parents thought Gay was the best thing since sliced bread.
Same here. Yeah.
And I would be walking home from school, and I'd be thinking, if ever I was famous, I'd be on the Late Show. And he was quite iconic to me. And then I started to hear that he was coming. He'd come to the theatre in Dublin, the smaller theatre, before I went to the Olympia, right? And he'd been to see it 3 times.
No way.
But he would always go directly afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So I never got a chance. So, and he was quite a big character in my whole Saturday night kind of as a kid. Before Match of the Day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was, and this was the last night. It was the Saturday night of one of the weeks. It might have been the first or second week in the Olympia, you know. And I would be, now you're talking about physical activity with that.
Oh, yeah.
The whole show is very physical for me. I start sweating out through my costumes and everything. So by the time I'm finished, I'm even when I'm kind of match, even when I'm match fit.
There's there's no costume changes like.
No,
you know what I mean?
but even when I'm match fit, and I've done the show a few times, the body still produces the sweat. But so I look quite shattered. Anyway, so I'm in the dressing room on my own, because that's one of the lonely parts of being one man show. There's no crack in the dressing room. You're in the dressing room on your own. Your stage manager will come in and tell you 15 minutes before the show, Aidan, you go out again, you come back in at 5, and then I'd go down onto the stage, and that might be the only interaction I have. That's why the pictures are so important to me. And Tom is in the dressing room with me and all that sort of stuff. So I'm in the dressing room. I've stripped off. I'm expecting the stage manager to come in. So
this is after the show.
This is after the show. Yeah. So they're good. Come in, Joe. What are you knocking for? Thinking it was Pierce, the stage manager. And it doesn't open. And I open the door, and it's Gay Byrne. And I'm in my underpants. Oh Jesus!
Oh Jesus! You close it or you welcome him in?
You know, I can't. I just remember thinking, it's Gay Byrne at the door. Gay Byrne. And his wife, you know, that I never saw her, but you know, in the Late Show, he was always mentioning her, you know, whatever. And Kathleen
right.
Byrne, her name was, wasn't it? Kathleen. And Kathleen was down the corridor, and there was 2 other friends. And I kind of froze, and I then ran in and grabbed a towel, and put it around me. And I said, please come in, please. I would have loved to have Tom. I would have loved to have had a chat with Gay Byrne.
Yeah.
But of course, what would you do? It's a total stranger in his knickers, and you're thinking, it's all right, no, it's okay, son, it's okay. But I just want to say how well you did, and my friends here want to say how well you did. And then he was started to move off down. I didn't quite go, oh, please, come in. I didn't go that.
Running after him.
But that was my Gay Byrne. That was my one chance to meet Gay Byrne, and in my underpants. Thank God. Because I often don't wear any underpants in the dressing room. You know, thanks be to Jesus I had put my underpants on at least. Christ, that would have been ferocious altogether.
Oh, I am so excited to watch this now. 29th of this month.
29th of June in the Rouge.
And you're also going to Calgary.
Going to Calgary now
tomorrow, is it?
Friday for a gig on Saturday. In the Irish Cultural Centre in Calgary.
If anyone wants to buy tickets or even follow you, is there any social medias you have?
I have the Tom Crean show, and I have the Tom Crean show. It's very hard to get Tom Crean on his own that isn't bought already. So when I had the website done and everything, the guy who was making the website said to me, well, we'll just call it Tom Crean Show. And so that's the show is all has all that, and then that's the handle for Instagram and all that. And also, I've just bought this out, Sean. It's roguefolk.com, roguefolk.com, and I think also on Harry. What's the ticket crowd again?
So you can go to
Eventbrite.
Eventbrite, yeah.
Or Eventbrite.
Eventbrite.
Okay.
Harry's just got a few.
We'll put the link up. Right
Perfect. Just along there.
Yeah.
Perfect. On top of the drinks.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's a pleasure to have you on.
That was great, Sean.
Thank
I thought
you
I'm
so
talking
much.
forever.
Oh, no, I could talk. We can talk for the night. Please like, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for listening. See you at the show. Epic.